5 years ago, Emma stood outside the courthouse holding a folder filled with divorce papers. The rain fell gently around her, but she barely noticed. The only thing she could hear was the sound of the judge's final words echoing in her mind. Her marriage to Daniel was officially over. People often assumed their divorce happened because they stopped loving each other. But the truth was much more complicated. Love had never completely disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath months of misunderstandings, unanswered questions, and painful silence. Emma remembered the early days of their relationship. Daniel had been her best friend before he became her husband. They laughed over simple things, dreamed about building a family, and promised they would always face life's challenges together. They believed their love was strong enough to survive anything. But life had other plans. Daniel started working longer hours after receiving a major promotion. The pressure was overwhelming, and he carried burdens he never shared with anyone. Emma, meanwhile, felt abandoned and lonely. Every late night at the office felt like another broken promise. Instead of asking each other what was wrong, they both began making painful assumptions. Small arguments slowly turned into daily battles. A forgotten anniversary became another reason to feel unloved. Missed phone calls became proof that something was being hidden. Every conversation ended with frustration instead of understanding. Friends and family tried to help, but neither of them was willing to admit how deeply they were hurting. Pride became stronger than honesty. Instead of fighting for their marriage, they began protecting themselves from more emotional pain. When rumors reached Emma that Daniel had grown close to a female coworker, everything collapsed. She confronted him, expecting the truth. Daniel denied the accusations, but after months of broken trust, his words no longer reached her heart. She believed the worst. Feeling defeated, Daniel eventually stopped defending himself. He watched the woman he still loved walk away because he believed nothing he said would change her mind anymore. The divorce happened quietly. There were no dramatic scenes, no screaming, and no final embrace. Two people who still loved each other simply signed the papers and walked away in opposite directions. That same evening, Daniel sat alone in his empty apartment. Looking at an old wedding photo, he realized there were things Emma deserved to know. He took out a pen and several sheets of paper and began writing the most honest letter of his life. In it, he confessed his deepest feelings. He explained the long hours at work, the sacrifices he had made for their future, and the painful truth behind every misunderstanding. He apologized for his silence and admitted that he should have trusted her enough to share his fears instead of carrying them alone. Most importantly, he told her that despite everything, he had never stopped loving her. The next morning, Daniel mailed the letter, believing it was his final chance to tell the truth. But fate had another plan. Because of an unexpected postal error, the letter never reached Emma. It was misplaced, forgotten, and left sitting in storage while 5 long years passed. During those years, both of them carried broken hearts, believing the other had never truly cared. Then, on an ordinary morning 5 years later, an old envelope appeared in Emma's mailbox. The faded handwriting on the front stopped her in her tracks. It was from Daniel. Keynote 3, a second chance or a final goodbye. The next morning, Emma woke up with only one thought on her mind: she had to find Daniel. For 5 years, she had lived with anger and regret, believing he had betrayed her. Now she knew the truth. The letter had changed everything she thought she knew about the end of their marriage. She began by visiting his old apartment, but the building manager told her Daniel had moved away years earlier. She contacted mutual friends, searched through old social media accounts, and even called his former workplace. Most people hadn't spoken to him in a long time, but one former colleague finally gave her a clue. Daniel had started a small business in a nearby town. Without wasting another moment, Emma got into her car and drove there. During the journey, her mind replayed every memory they had shared: their first date, their wedding day, the dreams they had built together, and the painful silence that had torn them apart. When she arrived, she saw him through the window of a small bookstore he now owned. He looked older. A few strands of gray hair framed his face, and the smile she remembered so well had become quieter. Yet she recognized him instantly. Emma hesitated at the door. After 5 years, what could she possibly say? Daniel looked up as the bell above the door rang. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to stand still. Neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, overwhelmed by memories and emotions they had buried for years. Finally, Emma held up the old envelope. "I got your letter," she whispered. Daniel's face turned pale. He recognized it immediately. "The letter," he said softly. "It finally arrived." Emma nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I believed things that weren't true. I never gave you the chance to explain." Daniel lowered his head. "And I'm sorry I thought silence would protect you. I should have trusted you enough to tell you everything." For the first time in years, they talked honestly. There were no accusations, no raised voices, and no pride standing between them. They shared the pain they had each carried alone. They admitted their mistakes, their fears, and the loneliness that had followed them since the divorce. Neither of them could change the past. 5 years had been lost forever. But they finally understood that their marriage hadn't failed because love disappeared. It had failed because they stopped communicating when they needed each other the most. As the sun began to set, Daniel smiled gently. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," he admitted. "Maybe we can't erase 5 years. But I'm grateful we finally know the truth." Emma reached for his hand, something she hadn't done in years. "Whatever happens next," she said, "I don't want another goodbye filled with silence." Whether they chose to rebuild their relationship or simply remain two people who finally found peace, one thing was certain. The letter that arrived 5 years late gave them something they had both believed was impossible, a chance to heal. Sometimes life doesn't offer a second chance to rewrite the past. But it does offer the opportunity to understand it. And sometimes, the truth arrives late, not to change yesterday, but to give tomorrow a new beginning. The greatest lesson of their story was simple: never let pride replace communication, and never assume silence means someone has stopped loving you. One honest conversation can save years of heartbreak, because words spoken with love are always more powerful than the silence that tears hearts apart. Emma stood frozen at her kitchen table, staring at the faded envelope in her trembling hands. The postmark was dated 5 years earlier, the very week their divorce had been finalized. Her heart pounded as she carefully opened it, unsure whether she was about to relive old pain or finally discover the truth she had been searching for. The first line stole her breath. "If you're reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to tell you everything I should have said long ago." Tears filled her eyes before she could continue. Daniel's words were raw, honest, and filled with regret. He admitted that he had made many mistakes, but not the one she had believed destroyed their marriage. The rumors about his coworker had never been true. She wasn't his secret lover, she was helping him organize a charity fundraiser for children with serious illnesses, a project he had wanted to keep private until it was complete. Daniel explained why he had worked such long hours. Months before their divorce, he had learned that Emma's father was drowning in debt and quietly facing the possibility of losing the family home. Wanting to protect Emma from more stress, Daniel had taken on extra work and turned down vacations, hoping to earn enough money to help without making anyone feel ashamed. He had planned to surprise her after everything was settled. Instead, his silence became the very thing that pushed her away. As Emma kept reading, every painful memory took on a new meaning. The missed dinners, the late-night meetings, the exhausted look on Daniel's face, they were never signs of betrayal. They were signs of a man carrying burdens alone, believing he was protecting the woman he loved. Daniel admitted that his greatest mistake wasn't working too much. It was believing that love could survive without honest communication. "I thought I was shielding you from worry," he wrote. "Instead, I gave you reasons to doubt me. If I lose you because I stayed silent, that will be the greatest regret of my life." Emma could barely breathe. For 5 years, she had convinced herself that Daniel had stopped loving her. She had built a new life around that painful belief. Yet every page of the letter revealed the opposite. He had loved her deeply until the very end. Neither of them had fallen out of love, they had simply been separated by fear, assumptions, and words left unspoken. When she reached the final page, a handwritten note caught her attention. "If this letter arrives too late, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope one day you'll know that my love for you never ended. You deserve the truth, and I'm sorry it took me so long to find the courage to write it." Emma gently folded the letter against her chest as tears streamed down her face. 5 years of anger, resentment, and unanswered questions disappeared in a single afternoon. The truth was heartbreaking. Their marriage hadn't ended because love had failed. It had ended because silence had spoken louder than either of them ever did. As she looked at the old envelope one more time, only one thought remained in her heart. She had